Today we'll be discussing chapter 4 in Ezekiel, with his countdown of lying on his left side for 390 days, and then 40 days on his right side. This is something that should be talked about now, because I believe we are in this countdown right now.
First, let's read the beginning of Ezekiel chapter 4 about the siege of Jerusalem and the days of iniquity. You also, son of man, take a clay tablet and lay it before you, and portray it on a city, Jerusalem. Lay siege against it, build a siege wall against it, heap a mound against it, set camps against it also, and place battering rams against it all around. Moreover, take for yourself an iron plate, and set it as an iron wall between you and the city. Set your face against it, and it shall be besieged, and you shall lay siege against it. This will be a sign to the house of Israel. Lie also on your left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it. According to the number of days that you lie on it, you shall bear their iniquity. For I have laid on you the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days. So you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. And when you have completed them, lie again on your right side. Then you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have laid on you a day for each year. Therefore you shall set your face towards the siege of Jerusalem. Your arm shall be uncovered, and you shall prophesy against it. And surely I will restrain you, so that you cannot turn from one side to another, till you have ended the days of your siege. Those 390 and 40 days of iniquity, symbolic of years, do have to do with the Israelites' unfaithfulness from both the northern and southern kingdoms of Israel. God establishes the Davidic kingdom. David's son Solomon is chosen by God to build God's temple and continue the dynasty during the time of the kings. But Solomon sins by building high places for false gods because of his many wives and worships those false gods. So after Solomon, God divides his people into two kingdoms, north and south. The northern kingdom, which started in 972 BC, was unfaithful to God right away. But eventually, the southern kingdom strayed by worshiping false gods too. So the 40 and 390 days of iniquity in Ezekiel 4 has to do with the divided kingdom of Israel. The 390 days of Ezekiel's left side has to do with the time from the start of the northern kingdom until the fall of both kingdoms. And you'll understand why we place the 390 days below as we work on that first. Many scholars have tried to make this work, but can't find a way to make it work perfectly. This is where I bring up how God's prophetic time is based on God's original ideal of 360 days per year. And I've repeatedly shown on this channel how prophecy works based on a 360-day year. So let's do this with those 390 years from the northern kingdom's iniquity. We take the 390 days of Ezekiel, which are the 390 years from the house of Israel, and multiply it by God's original standard of a 360-day year, and you get 140,400 days. Now we are living in a year based on 365 and a quarter days per year. So we need to reconvert those days into our modern time. We take those 140,400 days, and this time we divide by our modern year of 365 and a quarter days, and you get 384.39 years. So if the 390 years are about the northern kingdom's sins, and Israel split in 972 BC, with Jeroboam making his golden calves in the 8th month of 972 BC, then subtract those 384.39 years of prophetic time from 972 BC, and you get 587 BC, which is the year in the fall of Jerusalem from the hands of Babylon. So the 390 days and years does fit into the northern kingdom's years of iniquity from the division of Israel's kingdom in terms of God's prophetic years. And then the 40 days of Ezekiel's right side, which are symbolic of the 40 years for the southern kingdom, is easy as Solomon's reign ends at the end of 40 years, with sin and worshiping other gods. I know we did the fancy math for the north, but the 40 years of Solomon comes out to be 39.43 prophetic years when converted to God's prophetic time, which also connects to the length of Solomon's reign. So from the establishment of the Davidic kingdom to his son building the temple, which led to Solomon's unfaithfulness and worshiping other gods, thus resulting in a divided kingdom, those 40 years and 390 years are fulfilled in the prophetic time after David until Jerusalem falls in 587 BC, when God's first chosen people lose their promised land. Before we move on with Ezekiel chapter 4, let's clear the slide to make room for a familiar number. Those 430 days of Ezekiel represent the 430 years of God's prophetic time concerning the time of the kings from Solomon until the fall of Jerusalem. Those 430 years should stand out for those that study the Bible as the exact time frame from Exodus 12 in the sojourn time of the Hebrew people. This sojourn time is from the call of Abram until the Exodus from Egypt. And if you like parallels like I do, then those numbers matching should not be considered some sort of a coincidence. Then we can broaden this out to see even more parallels of 430 years in the Bible to examine its implications for us today. We left the two examples from the time of Abram's calling until the Exodus, and also the establishment of the Davidic kingdom in Solomon until the fall of Jerusalem were both 430 years. The first parallel of 430 years comes from Genesis 11. From the time that Eber begets Peleg until Eber's death was 430 years. These two men are important. Eber becomes the name of the Hebrew people because of his loyalty to Yahweh during the Tower of Babel rebellion. And the lifetime of Peleg was the indicator of the dispersal from the Tower of Babel. Then the next one we'll have to work at. We know from Genesis 9 that Noah lived for 350 years after the flood. And I've done this work before in my videos. Peleg dies 10 years before Noah, which marks the dispersal of Babel. And Abram is called by God 30 years after the dispersal of Babel, but 20 years after Noah's death. Then, if you follow the life of Abraham and his story, you'll find that his wife Sarah dies in Genesis 23. Sarah dies at 127 years, and Abraham was 10 years older than her, so he was 137 years old when she died. So if Abram was called by God at 75 years old, then Sarah's death was 62 years after God chose his people, the beginning of the Hebrew people. That means from the time of Noah's flood until Sarah's death, it was 432 years. So close to 430 years. There has to be something else to this that we just don't understand yet. And that understanding comes from the first column. You'll notice from the other parallels, Eber begets Peleg. God calls Abram to choose his first people, and the Davidic kingdom is established through David's son Solomon. Everything in this first column has to do with birth or the start of something. And Noah's flood marked the destruction of the world except for Noah's family. It didn't have to do with the birth of something. But again, we pick up something from Genesis 11. We find that our Arphaxad from the chosen descendant line in Shem was born 2 years after Noah's flood. That means it was 430 years from our Arphaxad's birth until Sarah's death in Genesis 23. And the parallels of 430 years continued to match in length of time with its context. These repeating like this has to be coming from God. Now we can get even deeper with these numbers to start revealing what they are foreshadowing. We mentioned how it was 350 years from the flood of Noah until his death in Genesis 9. We can also figure out that from the time of Peleg's birth, 350 years would be when Ishmael, the firstborn of Abraham, turned 70 years old. And we know the cast-off firstborn son turning 70 connects to all kinds of parallels from the Hebrew people, the firstborn of God. And then, even more context, after the 350 years to Ishmael turning 70, those 80 years left from the 430 years also lands on the stolen blessing from Jacob in Genesis 27. And we can keep going with finding more examples of 350 within the 430 years from every parallel. The third one, we have to work backwards. We know when the Hebrew people were freed that Moses was 80 years old and 40 years old when he fled to Midian. Then basic math of 430 years minus those 80 years tells us it was 350 years from Abram's calling until the birth of Moses, the deliverer of the Hebrew people. The 350 years becomes a subset parallel within the 430-year parallels. And this last one is a little on the side of educated guesswork. We do know for a fact from the establishment of the Davidic kingdom until the split of the north and the south was 40 years. And I tried looking for a significant birth 40 years after this so we can have another perfect parallel of 350 years until the fall of Jerusalem. And one person seems to fit, although the Bible does not record his birth date, and that is the prophet Elisha, the successor to Elijah. If you track the kings with Elijah and Elisha from that time, It does work out that Elisha would have been born 40 years after the split of the kingdom, and then the parallels would fit perfectly to allow 350 years after the birth of Elisha until the fall of Jerusalem. Although this one has a disclaimer that although I believe it, it cannot be proven, just supposition based on parallels working out perfectly by the guidance of God. But even if the last one is a little weak, you can plainly see how the other three parallels of 430 years have concrete parallels of 350 years within that time frame. And those 350 years kind of stands out as a number too. Abraham was the beginning of God's first chosen people. He was called by God at 75 years old and died at 175 years old. That makes 100 years of Abraham being the patriarch of God's chosen people until his death. Then those 350 years would be 3.5 units of 100 years per unit. And now those 350 years brings us to mind what we have discussed about the Great Tribulation being 3.5 years, leading to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And those 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation is supported by Daniel 7 and its 3.5 times that the saints of God will be given into the little horn's hand. Or Daniel 9:27 with its second half week from the last week equaling 3.5 days. And also Daniel 12 with God's holy people being shattered for 3.5 times. All those time frames is also supported in the book of Revelation, from the prophecy time of God's second witness in Revelation 11 being 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years in God's prophetic time. And also the authority time from the first beast of Revelation 13 being 42 months, which is also 3.5 years. All the prophecies from Daniel and the book of Revelation point to the Great Tribulation lasting 3.5 years. Now here's where I'm going to put my theory out there and what all these time parallels mean. Those 350 years being repeated over and over were hinting to the smaller parallel time frame from the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. Then, if those 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation are indeed paralleling the 350 years as a subset category of a larger 430-year period, then we need to look for some time frame of 0.8 of a year to fulfill the 80-year period outside of the 350 years within a 430-year total time period. But something else hit me that is coming up, and it does kind of fit. All the examples from the previous parallels included significant births, and there was a significant birth to mention in our modern times, and that came in the declaration from the nation of Israel being reborn on May 14th, 1948. And without doing all the conversion of prophecy time into actual time, from May 14th, 1948 until next year would be 80 prophetic years. You can do the math yourself. Could all these parallels be pointing to the Great Tribulation starting sometime next year? Yes, I believe so. And this is why I'm doing this video, to warn as many people as possible. We are going to find out by me using these parallels if God is with me by next year. If he is, and if I'm right, then alarm bells should be going off for everyone watching this video. But let's get back to Ezekiel and talk about him after the time of the kings. We first have to take a step back and see the larger picture of how God's people got to Ezekiel. We start with the Hebrew people leaving Egypt during the Exodus, and then after entering the Promised Land began the time of the judges. Then the people reject the judges and prophets and want a king to rule over them. This period is called the time of the kings. We talked about how David's son Solomon sinned, which led to God dividing Israel into the northern and southern kingdoms. The northern kingdom strayed from God right away and eventually was allowed to go into exile. Then the southern kingdom became corrupt, and God allows them to go into captivity in Babylon. God's people had lost the promised land, and this began a period of 70 years in exile. Now, during the time of the kings, God sent his prophets to warn both kingdoms of their unfaithful ways. But the prophets were not only warning the people, they were prophesying about the coming of the Messiah, who we know as Christians was Jesus Christ. Now in this channel, we went even further. We talked about prophets like Joel, Hosea, Amos, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Zechariah were also prophesying about end times too. There were more, but these prophets are the ones we talked about on this channel and have shown how they were not only prophesying about the first coming of the Messiah, but even past that to the second coming of Jesus Christ. But focus on the 70-year exile column. God's people went into captivity in 3 waves. The first wave included the prophet Daniel, and the second wave of exiles included the prophet Ezekiel. Most Christian scholars teach that the book of Daniel's prophecies were not only about Jesus, but about end times too. But for some reason, some do not recognize the same for the book of Ezekiel. What do you think? Why would God inspire Daniel in the first wave of exiles to write about end times, but then choose Ezekiel in the same time frame for the second wave of exiles to be looking backward at the fallen kingdom of Israel? Because I do not believe the book of Ezekiel is backwards looking. His book and his visions also have to do with end times as well, and should be synergized as some sort of a blueprint with the books of Daniel and Revelation. That means those 390 and 40 days from Ezekiel chapter 4 will have to be applied as some sort of a countdown during the time preceding the Great Tribulation. Yes, the exercise of Ezekiel laying on his sides did pertain to the sins from the divided kingdoms of Israel, but it is my contention those 390 and 40 days will also apply to us in today's world as God was preparing all of us for the end to this world. And it's our job to sync it up to find out when and how these things will happen. So now we have to understand what the point of Ezekiel chapter 4's countdown was by God. We pick that up with chapter 4, verse 9. Also, take for yourself wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt. Put them into one vessel, and make bread of them for yourself. During the number of days that you lie on your side, 390 days, you shall eat it. And your food which you eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day. From time to time you shall eat it. You shall also drink water by measure, 1/6 of a hin. From time to time you shall drink. And you shall eat it as barley cakes, and bake it using fuel of human waste in their sight. Then the Lord said, so shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, where I will drive them. So I said, Lord God, indeed I have never defiled myself from my youth till now. I have never eaten what died of itself, or was torn by beast, nor has abominable flesh ever come into my mouth. Then he said to me, see, I have given you cow dung instead of human waste, and you shall prepare your bread over it. Moreover, he said to me, Son of man, surely I will cut off the supply of bread in Jerusalem. They shall eat bread by weight and with anxiety, and shall drink water by measure and with dread, that they may lack bread and water, and be dismayed with one another, and waste away because of their iniquity. Ezekiel's countdown has to do with God cutting off the people's bread, leading to the measuring of food and water, eating it by weight and with anxiety. Now God was using food to punish a wayward people in Jerusalem around 6th century BC. But if I'm right, and this applies to us as well, we'll need to connect this instruction to something more clearly referring to end times. Now the scarcity of food from Ezekiel 4 does connect to a famous end times chapter in Matthew 24. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming, and the end of the age? And Jesus answered and said to them, Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars, and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. The beginning of end times, or what Jesus calls the beginning of sorrows, will be marked by famines in various places. Maybe Ezekiel is duly speaking about the end times with his measuring of food in chapter 4. But are we just desperately trying to connect these two things? Could there be more support from the Bible about a food shortage to come in the world? Now with Ezekiel 4 and Matthew 24, we'll add more biblical support from Revelation 6, and the third black horseman of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, Come and see. So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. Look at that. The black horseman has scales and measures wheat and barley, 2 ingredients used to make bread. Exactly like what Ezekiel 4 said was coming in his countdown. Now, 3 different books in the Bible are pointing to scarcity of food coming to the world, and the scarcity of food leading to something else is confirmed by the 4th pale green horseman. When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of whom sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him, and power is given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. The power given to the 4 horsemen included means to kill by certain ways of death, and one of those means of death was to kill with hunger, which comes from the 3rd black horseman with the scales and measuring of food. This is starting to connect and point to something very real: the scarcity of food during the end times. This is real, folks. And are those 3 books in the Bible matching in context about the scarcity of food not enough for you? I mentioned the prophet Joel earlier. He says this in his 1st chapter: "Alas for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as destruction from the Almighty. Is not the food cut off before our eyes, joy and gladness from the house of our God?" Now, Joel was a prophet during the times of the kings, but he's speaking about the day of the Lord coming as destruction from the Almighty. And key in on this: is not the food cut off before our eyes? Joel is duly speaking about end times as well, and is connecting Ezekiel 4, Matthew 24, and Revelation 6 with its scarcity of food. In addition to destruction, the book of Joel also features symbolisms about locusts, who we have connected to the locust from Revelation 9. Let's see how Joel connects to Revelation 9. "Then the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. To him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power." On this channel, I have spoken to modern fulfillments to both the smoke and the locusts who come out of it. So this should be resonating to those regularly watching the channel. Let's pick out some other verses from the rest of the locust passage. "And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. In those days men will seek death, and will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them." The authority to kill was not given to the locusts, just torment, as death flees from them. And in the last couple of years, there was a famous attempt on a life, but that person narrowly escaped death. The words of the Bible are being fulfilled before our eyes. The shape of the locust was like horses prepared for battle. Prepared for battle, but the actual battle comes after the period of the locust. And we know what the book of Revelation is pointing towards: worldwide dominion from the first beast of Revelation 13. "And they had as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon." On this channel, we've connected the name Abaddon to someone very real, whose name is spelled the same in Hebrew. Now those names, Abaddon and Apollyon, in Hebrew and Greek mean destruction. Exactly what the book of Joel describes as destruction in the day of the Lord. So it looks like the book of Joel and its locusts were preparing us for the locusts from Revelation 9. One woe is past, behold, still 2 more woes are coming after these things. The locusts of Revelation 9 are clearly labeled as happening in the first woe of Revelation, which does connect to Jesus saying famines will happen in the beginning of sorrows.
And I will say the period of the locust has already been fulfilled, with its leader whose name is spelled the same as Abaddon being in power at the time. I have specifically cited those 5 months in the video about the 6th trumpet being blown. The horses are prepared for battle, and the war for worldwide dominion has begun. Next stop, seals 1 through 4 from Revelation 6 being fulfilled concurrently to enable the first beast of Revelation 13 in gaining power over the world.
Now we have a few things connecting about the scarcity of food in the end times. This channel believes the Book of Ezekiel is an end times manual. Therefore, Ezekiel 4 and its countdown of 390 and 40 days would apply to end times, leading to a lack of food and water with people eating in anxiety. Ezekiel 4 on its own is not enough to prove it's about end times, but it does connect to Matthew 24, when Jesus said the beginning of sorrows would involve famines in various places. Both of those are supported by Revelation 6 with a third black horseman who has scales and measures wheat and barley that leads to people dying in hunger. These are no longer independent interpretations, but are indeed connecting to each other. Then Joel says food will be cut off in the day of the Lord, leading to destruction, featuring locust in its book. The locust of Joel connects to the locust of Revelation 9, which has a leader meaning destruction, and are clearly labeled as the first woe of Revelation. And that connects to Jesus saying that famines will happen in the beginning of sorrows. All of these are connecting to each other and are speaking with authority about the coming scarcity of food to begin the end times. This end times famine also is going to be supported by its corresponding bookend. I'll explain. In the book of Acts, it has this passage, "And in these days prophets came from Jerusalem to Antioch. Then one of them, named Agabus, stood up and showed by the Spirit that there was going to be a great famine throughout all the world, which also happened in the days of Claudius Caesar. Then the disciples, each according to his ability, determined to send relief to the brethren dwelling in Judea. This they also did, and sent it to the elders by the hands of Barnabas and Saul." Now, why is Acts 11 significant about the prediction of a great famine to hit the world? Let's wipe away the lower verses. Because in Acts 9, Saul sees Jesus and is converted by God. And then in Acts 10, the Apostle Peter converts the first Gentile. Acts 11 and its prophecy about a famine comes right after both of these significant events. To understand this more fully, we'll fade back Acts 11 to bring in something from the Gospel of Luke. "For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing babies in those days. For there will be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." The end times are described by Luke as the time of the Gentiles. Let me lay this out for you. Saul is converted by Jesus and becomes the apostle to the Gentiles. The next chapter in Acts 10, Peter converts the first Gentiles. And in Acts 11, there's a prophecy about a great famine to hit the world. The book of Acts marks the beginning of Christianity, but chapters 9 through 11 marks the time the Holy Spirit crosses over and thus begins the time of the Gentiles. That Luke describes the end times being fulfilled as the time of the Gentiles being over. We know from this channel that the Great Tribulation is going to be about the direct persecution of Christians that Jesus says will be the worst time ever. Now, wouldn't it be fitting that the end times will start with a great famine prophesied about in Ezekiel 4, exactly like the time of the Gentiles began with a great famine throughout the world? It's like God created chaotic bookends of famine to the beginning and end in the time of the Gentiles. Yes, this is all fitting together perfectly.
So what should we do as the Bible is prophesying about a famine to come into the world at the beginning to end times? Buy yourself some food and water now. This famine is coming, and me advocating for the stocking up of food and water is sound and biblical advice.
I give you the servant of God from Matthew 24. "Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master made ruler over his household, to give them food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Assuredly, I say to you, that he will be made ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, 'My master is delaying his coming,' and begins to beat his fellow servants, to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and will cut him in two, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." The faithful and wise servant's purpose is to give the people food in due season, or else it will not end well for that servant of God. Think about why this passage is in a famous end times chapter in Matthew 24. This is because this is an instruction to God's servant in warning his people to stock up on food and water.
I'm compelled to employ that teaching right now. Just watch the news. The conditions are set. Ezekiel 4, with its 390 and 40 days, is counting down right now. The Great Famine is coming to the world. In previous videos, I've highlighted several dates. I believe one of those dates begins chapter 4 from Ezekiel to trigger its countdown. The books of Joel, Ezekiel, Matthew, Acts, and Revelation are all pointing to a great famine to come at the beginning in the end times. The Bible story started with an instruction by God for Adam and Eve not to eat a certain food from a tree, and it will end with an instruction by God not to eat food that comes from the control of the Antichrist. It's time to prepare for that. May God bless all my brothers and sisters in Christ. This is just the beginning.